Shalom, this is Shira Sherbow coming to you from Sfat, Israel. And welcome to our weekly meeting, Tour for the Nations. Do y'all remember the movie Groundhog's Day? We're going to talk tonight about this triple murder. That's the title for tonight. But first I want to just talk, kind of build up to that. But there's that movie in 1993. A lot of people say it's like on their top 10 best movies of all time. I loved it. But what happens in that movie is Bill Murray is kind of got this crush on Andie MacDowell. Hi, Angela. And hi, Patricia. By the time the movie's over, Bill Murray goes from this bad, selfish person that Andie MacDowell has. She's the beautiful, self-assured girl next door, and she doesn't want anything to do with Bill Murray. But by the end of this movie, he gets stuck in Groundhog's Day, and I don't know, the movie takes it goes like years and years that he's stuck in Groundhog's Day. But what he does is he transforms into another person. He becomes like this wonderful, caring person, and by the end of the movie, she's very attracted to him. And so he finds out everything about her. He finds out, like, if she goes out to the bar, what drink she orders. He finds out what kind of music she likes. He finds out everything about her, and he transforms, and he becomes like this ideal person. And so I was thinking about, if you looked at our relationship as human beings and our relationship with God, we would be like the Bill Murray, and God would be like up here, the Andie MacDowell. And so it's like, how do us, mere human beings, think that we're going to ever have this relationship with Almighty God? And so here at Tour for the Nations, we talk about that. We talk about, if you want to have a connection with God, what happened? What happened at Mount Sinai? At Mount Sinai, God came down and gave us basically instructions like how to, or this is how you connect to me. If you want a relationship with me, this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And these are all they're called a mitzvot in Hebrew. I love this word mitzvot. And I have a visual aid tonight to show you how to really understand what God is doing when He gives us these instructions about Himself. He gives us these commandments to do. He's giving us, so here we are, a physical human being, and we're trying to connect with God. We're trying to connect with a spiritual being. But part of us is spiritual because we're made in the image of God. So we take this candle. This is our body. This is our flesh, the physical part of us. But then God breathes a soul into us. So then we have this flame. And you notice that the flame goes up. It kind of defies gravity. Usually everything comes down. But we look at the candle, and so the flame part is like our soul. When someone passes away, we always light a candle. Why? Because their body is no longer with us, but their soul, it reminds us that their soul has returned to heaven. So we see in a candle two things. We see the physical and the spiritual working together. So God gives us, on Mount Sinai, He gave us mitzvot. He gave us ways to do physical things with a spiritual result. Okay? So when we talk about the 7 mitzvot of the nations, I love, whoops, I better blow that out. I love the way that what Rob Ginsburg, he has this book called Kabbalah and the Meditation for the Nations. So he says before the revelation at Mount Sinai, that God commanded Adam and then made a covenant with Noah, giving them the guidelines for the universal religion for mankind. The best known parts of this covenant are the 7 universal commandments known as the 7 Noahide laws, because we all come from Noah. The Noahide covenant is God's gift to mankind for fostering goodwill and peace on earth. So if we want to be one with God and one with each other, create this world peace, He gives us these instructions. He gives us these 7 mitzvot, these 7 ways to do physical things with spiritual results, okay? So I'm going to just read you probably know this, but let me read you real quick what the 7 mitzvot are for the whole world. 6 of them are said in the thou shalt not, and then 1 of them is said in the thou shalt. Okay, do not murder, do not steal, do not worship false gods, do not be sexually immoral, do not eat the limb removed from a live animal, do not curse God, and then set up courts of justice is the possible one. So, I mean, is the positive one. Okay, so it might be very easy to look at something like do not murder and to just say, check, what does that have to do with me? I really don't murder anyone, and you go through these. But tonight, okay, so the title of tonight's message is Triple Murder. So there's a funny story that Akiva Tots, I've heard him say, he goes, now don't think that, when you stand before God and you say, and he says, well, tell me all of your good deeds that you did. We're not going to be able to say, well, there was this old lady that was walking through the park and, I didn't bop her over the head with a brick and take her purse and run off. God's going to be like, seriously, like you don't get credit for that. It's not like most people don't struggle with wanting to get up and kill people. And there's a few people, there's a small population they would actually get credit for not doing that, because that is a temptation for them. But most of us, it's not a temptation. So when we read this, category of, thou shalt not murder, we need to think like, okay, there's more to it. There's something that does apply to us. And so we can actually murder people. We can actually kill people with our tongue. Okay? So we're going to talk about 2 of these 7 mitzvot tonight. One is do not kill, and the other one is do not worship false gods, because that's another one we're going to like, no, I don't have any idols. Okay. But when we find out that 3 people can actually be killed with our words, that's pretty scary. So there's 3 people involved in gossip. There's the person doing the speaking, there's the person that's being spoken about, and then there's the person doing the listening. And I was surprised, but if you had to guess which one of those 3 people is the most guilty, it's actually the person doing the listening. But anyway, let's just go over. I took this is from an article by Lori Palatnik and Bob Berg, and she says, gossip can be more powerful than biological weapons, and the sages teach that each time someone speaks badly of others, it's like killing 3 people. Okay, so when we are the one doing the speaking, it's like committing slow suicide. Because what's happening is we are diminishing ourselves in the eyes of others. This woman, she shared her story, and she said that she was at a religious, she said, I was attending a ceremony at our house of worship. And she says, my sister-in-law walked in, and she was dressed very inappropriately. And she was wearing a revealing top, and I just couldn't believe it. And so she says, I pointed this out to my husband, and I says, wow, your sister has done it again. Is she ever going to learn? And her husband just stared at her. And she said, it's maddening. He does this every time I speak about people. Don't you think he should say something to his sister, or perhaps I should? Okay, and so this woman said, no, don't say anything to his sister, because it seems like, she says she won't be able to hear it from you. If you have this type of relationship, chances are she won't even be able to hear the weather report from you, let alone her choice of clothing. So she says, when you speak negatively about others, you are diminishing yourself. You're lessening, you become small in the eyes of the person that's listening. So it's like speaking badly about others is like a slow suicide. Okay? So then you have the person you're speaking about. So they're obviously being killed. You know, they're going about their business innocently, and they're oblivious to the fact that anyone is speaking about them, and that irreparable damage could be being done about them, whether the information is true or not. So the Japanese, they have a term for this, and my phone is not charged. Let's see if I can get it to charge. It's called losing face. So when someone loses their reputation, if their reputation is damaged in some way, they lose face, and it's like they no longer exist. So that person is being killed. And then the person listening, this is what was so surprising, because, you know, we have to choose our friends wisely, because they could be the one gossiping, and we are going to be the one that God holds the most responsible, because we're the ones listening. It says, the Talmud says that the person who is damaged most of all is the one listening. Worse than gossiping is listening to gossiping. And the reason is because the person who's speaking has already decided to speak, and the person that's being spoken about can't do anything about it. And so then God puts the onus on the listener, because they're the only one that can do anything about, you know, stopping the conversation. So there's a famous story about this sage named Hillel, and a non-Jew came to him and he said, I'm thinking about converting to Judaism, and I want to know everything that you're studying in your Torah. And he says, but me standing on one foot. Give me the short version. Tell me what this Torah says. Like, and so, here. Sorry. We had our phone off over Shabbat, and I didn't charge it. Okay. So there is a verse in this week's Torah portion that is in Leviticus 19:18. It says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that's really like the heart of the Torah. But when Hillel tells this person, you know, standing on one foot, let me just sum up the whole Torah, God's whole message to us in one sentence. He says that sentence, but he says it in the negative. He says, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. So why did he say it like that? Instead of saying what you should do, he said what you shouldn't do. Whatever is hateful to you, do not do to your friend. You know, I remember this book called Everything You Need to Learn, You Learned in Kindergarten, and I think it's true, because you remember your mother saying this to you and you saying this to your kids, like, would you like that done to you? If you wouldn't like that done to you, then you don't do that. You know, would you would you like it if somebody didn't share their cookies with you? Would you like it if somebody didn't share their toys with you? You know, don't treat anybody like you wouldn't want to be treated. And that sums up like the whole Torah. This is how we get to world peace. Don't do to anyone else what you wouldn't want done to you. But the reason he didn't say it in the positive is because if we love our neighbor as ourselves, we kind of get something out of that. We have the satisfaction that we did something nice for somebody. But it's much, much harder to do it in the negative. And the other day when I had, you know, just keeping it real, we had my husband and I were having an argument, and I saw him do this, like this body language, like he just closed his eyes, and I could tell that he was trying very hard to not say, he calls it, I'm not going down that bunny trail. I'm not going down that rabbit trail, whatever. My mother used to say, I'm not riding that merry-go-round. And my way, I say, well, I'm not showing up for that. I'm not showing up for that party, whatever. Like, it's like I'm not going to be pulled into that thing, you know, that thing that pushes my button, that never-ending thing that you said this, and I said this, and you said this, and we get into these little things. And so I could tell that he was like, he didn't want to, you know, however you want to say it, go down that rabbit trail, ride that merry-go-round, that train, whatever. And so he teaches me like somebody's got to be the bigger person. Somebody's got to just stop, you know, But it's very hard, because if somebody's saying something to you, everything in you wants to say something back. So this thing of not doing is so much harder to do than the doing. Whatever you don't want to do, if you don't want somebody to gossip about you, don't gossip about them. Don't gossip about other people. If, it's very, very hard to just stop yourself from speaking. But when we learned that we have this power to kill, so no longer when we look at these 7 mitzvot, do not murder, should we say, oh, I never picked up a brick and murdered that lady in the park and stole her purse. No, that's not really what he's talking about. He's talking about this thing, our tongue. He's given us this gift of speech, and we murder people. And whether you're listening, whether you're speaking, whether you're the one being spoken about, 3 people are being murdered here. Okay, so I remember this mother who called into Dr. Laura about, she had 2 sons and they each got married, and so she had 2 sons and 2 daughter-in-laws, and she said the 2 daughter-in-laws cannot be together in the same room. They don't like each other, they don't get along, and it's ruining every holiday. We can't all be together for any holiday because these 2 women do not get along. And she said to Dr. Laura, like, well, what do I do? This is breaking my heart. And so there's Moses' brother Aaron was a peacemaker, and this is what he used to do. And Dr. Laura kind of gave her this advice, kind of like what Aaron used to do. If he knew whether it was husband and wife that weren't getting along, or 2 sister-in-laws, or whoever the people weren't getting along, he would go to one person and he would say something positive about that other person to them. Like, they really would like to get back with you. They really want to have a relationship with you. And then he would go to the other person and he would say to them, they're really sorry for what they did. They really want to have a relationship. So Aaron was this peacemaker. And so when this mother wanted to know, what am I going to do? My 2 daughter-in-laws, can't be together. They don't like each other. So Dr. Laura told her, she said, whenever you're talking to one and the other person's name comes up, negatively, say something positive, like, well, what she said about you? She said she really liked your new hairstyle. And then she's talking to the other one and something negative comes up. Well, what she said about you? She really likes the way, she loves your decorating taste. She loves the way you decorated the house. She thinks you're a wonderful mother. Whatever she could say to be a peacemaker. And Dr. Laura said, just try this. Call me back after a certain amount of time and tell me if it works. And sure enough, the woman called back and she said, oh my goodness, like, I did this and we got together as a family. The 2 women spoke. And so she didn't fuel the fire. She was able to, make them almost like feel a little bit embarrassed. Like, here I'm saying this bad thing about this and she's saying nice things about me. So they were able to, the mother was able to save the family. And I want to just read what the Maharal says about women. The Proverbs 31 woman. It says, the virtuous woman, the law of kindness is on her tongue. But also, it says, women have a special quality and force for creating unity. So if world peace is going to happen, it's going to start in our marriage and in our home and in our extended family, and just go out to the world. And women have the power. Women have a special quality and force for creating unity. The Talmud says that Rabbi Yossi always called his wife his house, meaning that the woman has the special power of the house. A house brings together all that is within it as one. The power of unification is the power of a woman. And so we saw it play out in this woman with her 2 daughter-in-laws. And today I took a nice walk with one of my friends, and she was telling me, about this family. There's one part of the family, they just didn't get along. It was the same thing. Like, this one didn't speak to this one and this one. But there was one member of the family. They were a family that had 9 kids. And it was remarkable because all 9 kids spoke to each other. They all had a good relationship with each other. They all had a good relationship with the parents. And so the other members of the family were like, okay, so what are they doing? Like, what's working for them? Why are they all getting along? And what they came up with was that they refused to do this thing in Hebrew is called Lashon Hara. They refused to have the evil speech, and it kept their family together. And so this, I imagine, it's something that's going to start with the mother. She's the one that's raising the kids, right? And so when we are able to not do this thing, to hold back, it's very, very hard to keep from, it's a lifelong mission. Here we all are. We're supposed to be always working on ourselves, fixing ourselves, changing ourselves, and we could work on this from now to the end of our life, because this is a hard one. This thing of do not kill. Do not speak out and kill with our tongue. Okay, and so then also in our Torah portion is something that the first time when you read it, it's in Leviticus, you might think, what does that have to do with me, And so in Leviticus 19:4, here's this other commandment that we have. It says, do not make for yourself gods out of cast metal. Okay, so who does that today? And how is this even relevant to us, right? You say, no, I don't make idols. I don't do idol worshiper. I'm not an idol worshiper. Okay, so one of my favorite teachers is Y.Y. Jacobson, and I love what he says about this. And I love that name, Y.Y. I have a son that's JJ, but you can Google Y.Y. Jacobson. His initials are Y.Y. Jacobson. Okay, so he says, so seriously, what does this Torah commandment, how does this apply to our lives today? Do not make for yourselves gods, gods out of cast metal. So who does that? He says, I once encountered a beautiful interpretation to these words, which is profoundly relevant to the human psyche in all times. Because our Torah is for all people, for all generations. So we have to look at not just don't commit idols, oh, that was for them. This is for us, and this is how it's for us. He says, what this biblical verse is telling us is not to construct a God of a lifestyle that has become like cast metal, solidified in a fixed mold. He's talking to us about our daily routines, our habits, our addictions, our perceptions, how we see things. We get stuck. We get stuck in a mold, and it almost becomes like a god. It becomes like our idol. Like this is who I am. This is where I'm always going to be. Like almost like unconscious living. And the big thing that we want to do is consciously or intentionally or mindfully go through our day, not in this like unconscious way. So he says it's a natural human tendency is to worship that which we have become comfortable with. We worship our habits, patterns, attitudes, routines, and inclinations simply because we have accustomed ourselves to them and they're part of our lives. People love that which does not surprise them. We want to enjoy a God that suits our philosophical and emotional paradigms and comfort zones. We tend to embrace the fixed, unchangeable, and permanent molten God. All right. So he says, along comes the Torah, and it says, do not turn your consolidated mold into your God. Do not turn your habits, your natural patterns of thought, fears, or addictions into a deity. Instead, he says, life is about challenge, growth, mystery. Never say, this is the way I am. This is the way I do things. I can't change. Never think, this is the worldview I'm comfortable with. Any other way must be wrong. And I'll tell you my personal story. I went to a counselor one time. I only went once because it was like $100 for 1 hour. But she told me something, and I won't ever forget what she said because it cost me $100 for one sentence, but it was a great sentence. So I got to vent, and I told her my viewpoint, my perception of what was going on. I got it all out. And so she says to me, do you think that there's another way you could look at that? So I had to laugh because, okay, of course, we all know there's other ways to look at things, but it's like, no, but this is the way I was looking at it, and I wanted her to understand that this was this was the way that I saw it. But she let me know that I was like stuck. I was stuck with this is the way it is, and I couldn't, break out of like seeing it another way, seeing that there's another way to look at this. And so she really did help me, but just by, making that shift, because it's so easy to make a molten God out of, like, this is the way I see it. This is the right way, and not being open to, okay, well, maybe there's another way I could look at this, So let's just tie it all together. So we have these mitzvot. We have these ways, physical ways. Then we have the soul. So it's a physical body with a soul that's making a connection to God. So he gives us these 7 categories of mitzvot. So 2 of them were don't kill and don't have idols. And at first glance we would say, well, I don't kill, I don't have idols. But then when we look underneath of what is really being said to us, we kill people with our words. Okay, so this is something that when we're working on ourselves, there's a lot going on in the world that we have no control over. But you think of that serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, it always comes down to the one person that we can change is ourselves. And we can work on our tongue, and we can be a peacemaker in our family, and it's a ripple effect, because it goes in our family, our extended family, and pretty soon it's in the world. So through God's mitzvot that he gave us, do not kill, we can create world peace by not killing with our tongue. And then when he says don't have idols, well, we have to think about our lifestyle. What have we made into an idol? Whether it's our own perceptions and our own view of things, or whether it's our habits and going through the day unconsciously, without consciously, mindfully, intentionally trying to do what God wants us to do. And I don't know, you've probably heard of Viktor Frankl. He says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So this is a constant challenge, just to work on ourselves, challenge ourselves. And I'll end with this, of all the things that God made, he created with his speech. But can you think of what God made that he didn't create with his speech? Because he said, let there be light, and there was light. Hi, Pam. Thank you all for coming on. I really appreciate this. And I want to tell you that we're going to have a Zoom room. We're going to meet together in the Zoom room, and the link is there on our women's gathering, and it's going to start at 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'd love to see you in there. We could talk more about this. But okay, so God created the world with his speech. But there's one thing that God did not say, let there be, and that was us, man. He didn't say, let there be man. He says, God created man, from the dust of the earth. Let us make man in our image. So what that tells us is that we're not supposed to be speaking as much as we are doing. We're supposed to be walking the walk more than we are talking the talk. Okay, so God created us to do, not so much say. There's a lot of virtue in silence, choosing our words carefully, but we are all about doing, and that's that word mitzvot again. Doing physical things, but with a spiritual implication. Doing on earth as it is in heaven, bringing heaven down to earth, making the world a home for God, creating world peace, being a peacemaker with our tongues, with other people that aren't getting along, being that person that brings them back together. This is what we do, okay? And we don't get stuck in our molds, in our ways of doing things, okay? We want to always be open to what God is telling us, always working on ourselves, always changing ourselves. And here it is, this is our Torah portion. This is Leviticus. And it's very relevant for today. It's very, very relevant for what's going on in the world, working on ourselves, changing ourselves, doing what we do have control over. A lot of introspection is going on right now. God has our attention with what's going on in the world. And so we want to say, what do we need to do? What do we need to change? What tshuva do we need to do? Tshuva is like transforming, the way that Bill Murray did in that movie. Like he transformed his whole self. He was this bad, selfish person. He becomes this wonderful, caring person. And so that's what we're all working on. We're all working on doing tshuva, changing ourselves, transforming ourselves, doing these mitzvot, not killing, not having idols, and really thinking about what that really means in our day. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.